I have a real distinct memory of being in primary school and queuing up for something. I don't know what we were queuing up for. And then just one of the girls like going into my mum's Japanese,
Yeah.
and and having an awareness of, oh, I'm different, and the way that I'm different is laughable. It's ludicrous and laughable and ridiculous and shameful. And then all the other stuff like Chinese burns, Chinese whispers, all of that. It's just all of that stuff that feels so ridiculous and painful at the same time. I have an amazing mother. She's still alive, thank God. But I think my biggest fear in life is losing her. And she's the Japanese parent in my family. And so I think that's why I wrote May as a motherless girl, because that is one of my biggest, if not biggest, fears in my life.
Welcome back to Mixed Up. I'm Emma.
And I'm Nicole. And today our guest is Hanako Footman, author of her debut novel, Mongrel, following the lives of May, Yuki, and Haruka, whose interwoven stories bring the reader across Japan and England, revealing a, quote, tangled web of desire, isolation, belonging, and ultimately hope. Hanako is also an incredible actress of Japanese, English, and Irish heritage.
May thought that after the holiday, Fran would forget about her, that she would go back to her life at boarding school with its oak trees and lacrosse team, reducing their time together to nothing more than anecdotal. The kind of lazy story May imagined Fran telling her blonde equestrian doormates while she unpacked her suitcase for term. But it is Fran who sends May a wife request on Bebo the day she returns from France. When they migrate to MSN a week later, it is Fran who nudges May when she takes too long to reply. And soon, it is more likely than not that, when she doesn't have Saturday sports, Fran is driven by her mother from the depths of Surrey and deposited at May's house, where they spend all weekend together. May imagines that being with Fran is how the 90s sitcom stoners feel when they've taken a hit. The two of them laughing so hard their faces ache, soft stomach muscles burning with joy. Saturday afternoons are spent delirious on caramel coffee frappuccinos, licking the whipped cream off green straws, sucking syrup out of the crushed ice until it is flavourless and throwaway. Together they pool fistfuls of their parents' coins to buy biscuit waffles that they eat guiltlessly. They use the word hyper to describe each other without a trace of irony. They feel the safety and power of their 14-year-old bodies walking down the high street side by side, their shoulder-length hair swinging to the tempo of their widening hips. They know the men on the streets cannot yet touch them, that their youth is a wilderness too unyielding to reach. And so they shriek with the immunity of children, with the ignorance of a girl before she is eroded. What exists between May and Fran is something close to symbiosis, a biological word May learns in her first term of Year 9. Symbiosis, any type of prolonged and intimate biological interaction or relationship between two separate organisms, be it mutualistic, commensalistic, or parasitic. The two organisms must be of different species. Different species. Fran with her sun-kissed golden hair, thick and dry, the kind of hair that belongs in picture books, the kind that's roughly, lovingly brushed by a mother, braided before bedtime, blue eyes that you could eat, hot, bruised cheeks in the cold, a mole on the neck, skinny calves, a scar through her eyebrow that longs for a tongue to love it. May, brown eyes, too small, brown hair, too dull, bony and in love, different. Over the blissful weeks, then months, spent together, May finds herself mopping up every morsel of Fran, her words, expressions, until they are one spilling whole. May wills her body to fuse with Fran's, until Fran's translucent arm hairs and cut fingernails are also her own, until she feels like she's inside her best friend. Sometimes she is. The first time, one lazy afternoon in late autumn, Hidden among the green of a bamboo grove, a symbiosis of different species occurs. Fran's lips fusing with May's, saliva, an eyelash, fingertips. They are innocent fumblings, always masked as practice for when the real thing comes. The real thing, their first kisses and foreplay with boys, spin the bottle and teeth banging. Those would be the first-time stories they would choose to recount over warm bottles of Moretti in their 20s. The autumn weekends spent cupping syrup-sunk lattes give way to the bite of winter. The accompanying downfalls of rain do not depress them like they will after the age of 18. They are still too young and happy for a grey day to annihilate them. When it rains, May's father picks them up in Matilda's silver Mini and drives them back home for 6 o'clock dinners, where they eat things like chicken nuggets and peas and feel the comfort of childhood, even though their boobs are itching with growth. Some nights, May's dad suggests they have an Oriental night, your favourite, May. Her father's bowls of egg fried rice are confused and, to the seasoned eater, disgraceful. Last night's basmati fried in olive oil, mixed with luscious yolks, a splash of supermarket-owned soy sauce. But these bowls are the closest thing to her mother's food, and she craves them like nothing else. They have a way of holding her, even if she is left wanting. The eating is always a solitary act, a breaking open, where May can be her mother's daughter again, where she allows herself to be taken over by grief until the final mouthful. That's not my favourite, May would say whenever Fran was over. We want pizza, or lasagna, or spaghetti, or chicken Kiev. All that pre-packaged European food that was acceptable and loved. She knew that in school canteens across the country, children like her felt the daily punch of shame, flinging perfect daikon crescents into the open mouths of bins, their chicken bento slandered as dog meat. May did not yet trust Fran to love the parts of herself that were buried in shame. She had been called a chink too many times.
I have honestly loved every minute of reading this book, and you've done such a spectacular piece of writing. So thank you for bringing it into our lives and for joining us today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, seriously, it's I love reading books that feel like films, and that's definitely what this is for me. So yeah, it's beautiful visually.
Well, that's good, because that is the hope, the plan, the next step. Yeah.
Amazing. That's so good to hear. I mean, I guess that is perfect, because that kind of lyrical way that you write, obviously, like Emma says, it's so visual. You can see it, you can feel it, you can almost like reach out and touch it. Could you tell us a little bit about the process of you writing it and kind of how you saw it taking shape over time?
Also, I want to know how much of you and your yourself you've put into it.
Yeah.
Because it feels like there's lots of personal. It just feels like there's a lot of the personal in there, and obviously this is the first time we're meeting, so yeah, I want to find everything about you. Tell me.
Let me start from the beginning. Well, so to answer your question first, Nicole, it actually started off in quite an unorthodox way, in that I wrote a TV pilot first, and then it transformed into a novel. I wrote a pilot because I am first and foremost an actor, and at the beginning of my career, all the roles that were being sent my way were for white characters, and then which I was told I would never play by
Simultaneously
several people in the
Right.
industry. And so I was desperately trying to
Very confusing.
be as white appearing as possible. And then as the Asian roles started trickling in, I was then told I wasn't Asian enough and I didn't look Asian enough. And so it sort of I reached a breaking point, really. And I was waiting and waiting for someone to come and sweep me off my feet and finally give me this role that I always envisioned for myself, but it just never came. It never happened. And so I kind of realised that I had to be that person. I had to save myself.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this pilot, and then I was writing the pitch document to send out to these phantom producers. I didn't know any producers. And lockdown had just occurred, and I was writing these character descriptions. They were becoming more and more literary. And I thought, well, the world's ending and this is enjoyable, so I'll just continue on this path, not knowing that I was writing a book. But, that kind of slowly came into focus. And then cut to 3 years later and I had a full manuscript. So that was the process. And then I went out to agents and signed with my amazing agent, Rachel, and then luckily got published. But really, there was only one publishing house that was interested.
Interesting.
Wow.
So I really
That's
was
so
very lucky.
interesting.
Yeah, it was no after no after no after no.
Really?
I was getting quite worried. And then luckily, this very new, small imprint at Bonnier, who mostly do non-fiction actually,
Yeah.
an editor there, Rose Green, read it and she loved it, read it overnight and then gave me an offer.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is
I wonder
incredible.
if also, that non-fiction element helps because, what I love about these kind of stories, and this story in particular, is like that layered nuance. And, we could sit here and say, oh, we only recognise it because, we're mixed. And, obviously there's a character in the book who really speaks to us and we can like recognize these things straight away. You're like, okay, this is a bit of me.
Which, by the way, is so rare as a mixed race person
Very rare.
Yes.
to read and experience in any form of media.
Yeah.
Which is also another reason why I wrote this book.
Yeah.
So that, I was listening to your podcast on the way here and you spoke of us and you meant and you were referring to the collective us, and for so long I didn't know what the collective us was. I felt so isolated and mixed up in my mixedness. And, you have to make such an effort to find your community as an adult that isn't immediately there. Well, in my case anyway, it wasn't there for me. I grew up in a very white, affluent area. And, writing a book like this allowed me to create a bridge between me and other mixed race people and other people just in general, to share our stories and open up that communication.
Yeah. And it rings so true. I think one of the things, that passage that you just read us between about May and Fran and the kind of forming of their early relationship.
I know what you're gonna say.
I know what I'm going to say.
The hive mind.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, and also
know.
we've been working on our book as well, and
Yeah.
one of our very early chapters is called "All My Friends Are White," and it was like something that you and I bonded over early on, and also something that I know I personally struggled with admitting, because I felt I felt a type of way about it because I'm not white, like I'm not mixed white, and so, but that is
still
those are the
synonymous
people.
somehow with being mixed.
Exactly.
In a way.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And those are the people that I grew up around, and I've gone through a whole gamut of emotions. I think about it, but now I've accepted that I can't change the way I was brought up and who I grew up around. But I connected so much with May in those really early stages where she's just grappling with those things, and like she's grappling with girlhood and simultaneously, wanting this connection to her mother, wanting this connection
May
to
is
home.
grappling with.
She is grappling with stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I just saw so much of myself in her, and like wanted to scoop her up and be like, everything's gonna be okay. But yeah, I was wondering, to Emma's earlier question, like, what were the parts of yourself that you felt that you could put into these stories, whether it's with May, whether it's with Yuki, whether it's with Haruka, or anywhere in the book?
Yeah, I guess the closest character to me is May, in that we both grew up. So May grew up in Surrey, and I grew up in Wimbledon. So it's,
Yeah.
basically the same.
Same. Same, but tennis and no tennis.
Yeah, exactly. I think growing up, I didn't have anyone around me that had a similar lived experience. I didn't. All the girls I went to an all-girls school from the age of 4 to 18, which is
That feels
pure
like horrifying.
madness.
I'm sorry.
Interesting
I was
experience
like,
in of
I'm
itself.
scared. I was like, I feel scared by that. But
Yeah, and my primary school was a Catholic school. We had nuns. It was an amazing school. But I don't know. There's just a lot
There's
going on.
I went to Catholic school too, so I get it.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess at the time I wasn't thinking, why is there no one like me? But there were these moments, like where I'd be in the school canteen and I'd open up my lunchbox and I'd get my rice out and everyone would be like, what's that?
Same. Yeah.
Classic kid
Yeah,
stuff.
of course.
But it really stays with you. And that's that. I know that my white peers didn't have to put up with that stuff. And then as you get a little bit older, and then they start the chanting. My mum's Japanese, my dad's Chinese, so I ended up like that.
I
all of
remember
that
that chant so vividly as well.
Yeah.
When I saw it written out, I was like, oh my God. Because I hadn't even heard it since I was a child, but I saw it when you write about it in the book. I saw it and I was immediately like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I remember when the kids at my school used to do that.
I have a real distinct memory of being in primary school and queuing up for something. I don't know what we were queuing up for. And then just one of the girls like going into my mum's Japanese,
Yeah.
and and having an awareness of, I'm different, and the way that I'm different is laughable. It's ludicrous and laughable and ridiculous and shameful.
Right.
And then all the other stuff like Chinese burns, Chinese whispers, all of that. It's just all of that stuff that feels so ridiculous and painful at the same time. I have an amazing mother. She's still alive, thank God. But I think my biggest fear in life is losing her. And she's the Japanese parent in my family.
Oh, I want to dig into this, but let you finish.
And so I think that's why I wrote May as a motherless girl, because that is one of my biggest, if not biggest, fears in my life. Not only because my mum is an incredible woman and really, my my dad is also great, but my mum is like next level.
Is it always the way?
That's so
somehow?
funny.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think my mum is just a lot more capable of showing her love and being generous with her love and giving her love, whether it be that in the meals she cooks for us or the way that she talks to us and takes her time. She'd like drive me 2 hours to my violin lessons on a Saturday morning. Like that's good. That's good parenting.
Yeah.
Like, that's dedication.
Oh
that's
my
real
gosh.
care.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why. So there are some similarities and there are some major differences.
Yeah.
And I do not envy May in that respect, because what I did to her as the author is pretty brutal.
Yeah.
But we do share a lot of stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to dig into the two things. I want to circle back to I'm going to call it All My Friends Are White now, because you've put that in my head.
Yeah.
And that chapter for us that we wrote is very much, it's a metaphor for just being around whiteness rather than like actually all of your friends having to be white. But yeah, so I want to talk about that a little bit, but also about grief in general and grief as a mixed person, because we've touched on it. We've not done an episode on it, but we've touched on how there's somehow something that's like specific about it, especially if you're losing one parent who is your connection to the heritage or the culture that is disputed by people in your life,
Right.
or just in life in general, because it so often is the case, I think, with mixed people, that somebody somewhere is trying to dispute
Yes.
what they're telling them that they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
on who they are.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a specific experience, I think, and also a specific fear, to your point, in terms of losing that person. So I kind of, I wanted to ask you, what was your intention in going into that theme of grief? Did you want to communicate that and explore that, and that was something that was important to you as a person because that's locked in with your fear? I kind of just wanted to explore that.
Yeah. I think removing May's one connection to her Japaneseness, and that is her mother, meant that I could. It's so weird talking about writing and like why I did what I did, because at the time I have no idea why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it, and so now I have to like put on my like retrospective sort of analytical Spark Notes hat.
I'm into it. I love it.
Love Spark Notes.
Yeah. Oh, God bless Spark Notes.
I know.
That saved
It
me.
really got me through
Really got me
so
through
many tough times.
Totally. I guess, let me rephrase this. I think as a mixed race, half Japanese, half white individual, my only access point to my Japaneseness is my mother. So if I take her out of the equation, then I am desperately grappling at something that feels like it no longer belongs to me. And that is compounded by the fact that I don't look Japanese, quote unquote. I'm not fluent in the language. I don't live in Japan. And yeah, I mean, those are three pretty major things. I'm not perceived as a Japanese person. And when I'm with my mother, I feel Japanese. I feel like as Japanese as I can be. So taking the mother out of that storyline meant that May was really on this quest to reclaim her Japanese self, which is something that I'm still doing, despite my mother being around. But I think I have a huge fear of my mother dying as well, because I worry that when she dies, my Japanese self will die with her. And how do I honour my Japanese self when she's gone? How do I hold on to those parts of myself? My mother, it was very strange. In the second year of writing Mongrel, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And for anyone that's read the book will know that that happens to one of the characters later on in the novel. And I, in my mad grief, I thought that I had kind of manifested it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And my mum is healthy and alive, and my God, I'm so grateful. But it was really touch and go for a while, and I had to get very comfortable. I when I found out about the diagnosis, I cancelled all of my plans, and I just sat in my grief because I knew that I had to metabolize it somehow, or like try and not befriend it, but face it.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I wanted to just like push it down, or I knew that the instinct for a lot of people would be to push it down and keep calm and carry on.
I was going to say that's a very mature approach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because you're right.
I know
Most
I
people-
didn't do that.
Most people would avoid feeling anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I knew that I had to, otherwise it would come crashing down on me and destroy me.
Yeah. which it does.
Which it does anyway, I think. But I don't know, maybe I was trying to like meet it on some level. But yeah, I mean, it's still something, having gone through that and come out the other side, I am more prepped and primed for the emotions that will come up. But I'm not ready for that moment, and I know it will destroy me, as it does all of us. Anyone and everyone who's experienced losing a loved one it's horrific. But I think it's it also hits on another thing when that person you love is so connected to your identity and that part of yourself that you feel like you don't have a complete hold over once they pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I'm trying to think of ways that I can still honour that side of myself, my mother, and my Japaneseness, and that's through the food I eat, the rituals that we do, keep going back to Japan, keep going, engaging with the community. Luckily we have a house in Japan, which is incredible. Amazing.
Yeah.
I think even just by writing the book, you know, that's a huge step on that journey. And also for others who can read it, who are in a similar position or recognise themselves, you know, like I recognise myself in that grief. I recognise also so many things that May is grappling with at the same time. Like I'm actually really sad for her. I was really sad and devastated for her, especially when she's dealing with being exoticized at the same time as dealing with hating that side of herself. Because I thought something that was really interesting is how when home changes and geography changes, your location changes, how that can then change your opinion of self, the way that you read yourself in your environment. When you were talking about how she was special and she was seen as special in one place, and then she moved and she was still singled out,
all of that
but it was reversed.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, that's such a strong
so true
concept. And I think so many of us can relate to that, being alienated from that thing that we once thought was something that we were proud of in our identity, and then all of a sudden, whether it's geographical location or the all my friends are white thing again, where it's we're suddenly in this super white environment or whatever,
and you're
it
somehow
is
invisible but also
hyper visible.
There's a lot of bending that one has to do to be accepted in different places. And when I go to Japan, I am so self-aware of how people are not perceiving me, which is they're not seeing me as Japanese. And so I tried desperately hard to breach that void, and by speaking Japanese and doing all the right things that you're meant to do in Japan, being uber conscious. And then over here, growing up, I desperately just wanted to be accepted and loved as a white person. And so there's just a lot of shape shifting that one has to do depending on the environment that you're in. And as much as one would like to say that, I know how to stand on my own 2 feet and I can ground in on my authentic self and all of that, your authentic self is so dictated by the people that are around you and the community that's around you. And different aspects of your authentic self will come out in those different communities. And if you're in one place for so long, those other aspects of your authentic self, they get hungry.
So true.
And they become starved of all the things that you want to be feeding them but can't, because it's little things. I can't just go to the convenience store down the road and buy an onigiri and a strawberry milk, which my inner child longs for. I find myself going 15 minutes out of my way to a meeting to get an onigiri so that I feel I'm feeding my soul and my body with the things that it wants. But you have to go that extra mile. You have to write a book to come out as a mixed race person, to come out as a Japanese person.
Right.
Do you feel do you relate to that word coming out, or are you saying it in jest, or do you really feel?
I mean, I'm also bi, so the idea of coming out has, and most of my friends are gay, and it's something that we talk about, but it's never been an issue for me. For me personally, coming out as someone who, desires everyone,
Right?
Because it just feels like the most natural thing in the world to me.
Of course.
But coming out as a Japanese person is so much more of a shadow for me, just because of the way that I experienced the world,
Right.
and the stuff that other people put on me. And so that Japanese side of myself I hid away. But yeah, I guess and so it does feel like I've had to kind of come out and continue to come out.
Yeah. I really relate to that. I think I remember really specifically there was this moment when the Stop Asian Hate movement was kind of taking shape on social media. And I remember reading an article, I think it was, I can't remember, I feel like it was like NBC News or something, and it was like this really stupid opinion piece about how I'm really summarizing. Yeah, I'm really paraphrasing, but it was basically saying that like, oh, Black people and Asian people have like never been in community, so like,
oh yeah, I remember this.
Oh,
these
yeah, I
two
remember that
things
narrative.
have to like be separate. And yeah, and then I posted a picture of like of me and my best friend. My best friend, she's so funny and so like genius for doing this. But there was this I can't remember, I think it's oh my gosh, what's her name? Kamala Harris's sister or like
The solicitor.
Yeah.
She won't be a solicitor.
she's
It's
not,
America.
yeah.
Lawyer.
Lawyer? Yeah. I was like, yeah. She has this range called Phenomenal Woman. And then she then printed like these different shirts where it was like phenomenally Black, phenomenally Asian, phenomenally whatever. And my best friend at the time, she was like, there was no like mixed option.
Yeah.
So I got you both Black and Asian.
Oh, that's so
And
nice.
which I still have to this day. It's just so funny. I
want
just like
one.
interchange like interchanging the shirts.
Yeah.
But I remember at that time I posted a photo, like just a photo of myself in the phenomenally Asian shirt, knowing that a lot of people, especially the people who follow me online, and who had followed me from the kind of surge of Black Lives Matter people who kind of like came in flux after
Right.
people were like, these are the Black people you should follow.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I was like, I felt that was kind of like my coming out as Asian. I was a bit like, I just want to remind people that it is possible to be these two things at the same
At
time.
once.
Yeah.
And that as much as I am Black, I'm Asian. And yeah, it felt like this kind, again, like this kind of, we talk about this all the time, this like flag in the sand that you have to always be like putting up to be like, okay, like I'm part of this group too, like, you know.
It's interesting how those of us who don't look the expected way, you know, whether it's Asian or, you know, whatever, oftentimes we will turn to fashion to go, you know, because that's the, you know, it's visible and it's tangible.
Yeah.
You know,
That's such a great
you
point.
know, but then that's another thing is like, I mean, I don't know, I want to ask you, first of all, I imagine the acting world, and we've actually had this come up so many times. It was actually a surprising theme that came up early on in terms of people
when we first started recording,
telling us like, oh, you know, because I'm mixed Asian or I'm mixed Black or I'm mixed this, I'm mixed that. I go to do my audition and everyone's like, I'm sorry, but you can't possibly play a mixed Asian person. And then they're like, but I am a mixed Asian person. But and then there's a white woman sitting there or a white man sitting there.
Oh, God, yeah.
You cannot possibly play this person.
Yeah.
And it's like so meta because you're like, I am the person.
that is me.
Yeah, exactly.
You're telling me
What
I
do
can't
you
play the
mean?
person.
Yeah.
And then you
God,
have, you know, I imagine people in the real world who actually can be quite vehement about telling you that you are not the person,
Right.
you know. And I imagine you know, you're talking about like coming out as Japanese. I imagine you've probably had experiences of being labelled as white passing within the...
I actually really hate that phrase.
We do too.
Yeah,
so in our
good.
book we've actually we've got a whole chapter about how we
makes my
need
blood
to
boil.
make that redundant.
Because the barometer is whiteness.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Well, I think
And also it
there's
always
so many
comes with the like,
reasons.
congrats, you're white passing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, there are certain privileges that come with that. Absolutely. But you're sort of, the way that you're saying it, you're insinuating that I should be happy about that, and that it's like I'm hotter because of it. It's like when people go, oh, but you don't actually look that Asian. And like it's a compliment.
And I think like that's the issue. The thing for me is that I really hate about it is, and we've talked about this at length, obviously we've written about it, so you don't need to say this. But for everybody,
you don't have to tell me, but yeah, I agree. I agree already by default.
I really don't need to tell you. We've had about a belly full of this now. But yeah, basically, obviously the phrase white passing comes from the antebellum South and post-slavery, and is actually about a specific, point in time and a specific way of, avoiding certain oppressions, being arguably
killed as well.
Yes. Well, I was going to say being arguably safer in your life.
Being safer.
However, like we obviously know based on true accounts that the very real fear of being discovered and the very real fear of having to live your life in that way, and the retribution that would be, that would come to pass if you were discovered.
Yeah.
Arguably safer.
Yeah. 100%.
But yeah, for me, the word passing implies like active deception.
Yeah.
And that's the issue for me. The issue for me is that I think, as mixed people, are often tied to this idea of deception. Because it's like, well, which are you?
So true.
You've suddenly come out as telling me you're Asian.
Yeah.
I thought you were black. You've been fooling me this whole time.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very real feeling, because people are so obsessed with the boxes that they can't hold space for the fact that you're both. You're one and you're both.
And that also holding space for both or multiple somehow means you're taking things away from other people. That's something that I'm really picking up on recently. It's like, again, it's not even this idea, it's not even just the idea of like, you've tricked me, but it's like, you want more stuff? What more stuff can you possibly, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, that's something that really frustrates me. Because again,
like you're being culturally greedy or something.
It's like like a level of greediness, or again, like, we're over here in this camp, and if you feel like you can go between, you're this little flip-flopper or something. That there's something,
you're political flip-flopper.
Exactly. that you're, again, like you're trying to take something from, and no one can take you as seriously. Which
it's really interesting
is hard.
Because so we did another podcast which was about hair recently, and Paige, who we did it with, she sent something through, and it was this post which was like really aggressively saying, like, if you're mixed, you should stop calling yourself black because you're not black.
Oh my God.
And why can't you just stay over there in your own lane? And like, you should be calling yourself, and even like had the audacity to be like specifically biracial. And it's like, well, okay, we don't identify that with that, even if we're talking about ourselves as like mixed, but okay, cool. Like, in my case, I don't really identify with that. But it was interesting because one of the comments the author wrote underneath and pinned was, seeing as you're 50-50, why don't you call yourself white? Like, why don't mixed people call themselves white? And it's like, this level of understanding of like, lived experience in the world for many of us is really, really sorely lacking.
Really,
truly.
It's incredible what people, again, what they put out there and what they want to say about you, and what they, again, foist onto you all the time.
And it's so reflective of their own shit, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And
really
their belief that there's not enough room for them, and so there's not enough room for you. And actually, there should be enough room for everyone, and we should be able to have nuanced conversations about identity and race. And it, again, listening to your podcast on the way here, and you talking about how going online and reading about comments about mixed race people and how they were saying like mixed race people are pick-me's. And
Yeah. Oh my god. That's a favorite.
I had no idea.
Oh,
How
yeah.
dare they? I'm absolutely not a pick-me.
I'm also I send these things to Emma. I've slowed down on the sending these things to Emma, to be fair.
I think you're probably going to have to start again as we near book time, because I need to know what's going on. But the problem
she wants
is,
to know
like,
what the people are saying, and I'm like on Twitter being like, they're saying some.
So is
crazy
are you
things.
finding this on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok? You're on TikTok?
Oh, there was a time.
TikTok's the worst.
There was
I
a
think.
time when I was
I
on
can't.
when I was on mixed race TikTok, and I had to stop. I had to be like not interested because it was making me
Sick.
panicked. I was
No,
literally panicked
why?
by the state of things.
No, why?
The comment, like I
What?
thought Twitter comments are bad. The TikTok ones are worse.
Oh
No.
my goodness.
Way
It's not
worse.
even the comments that you told me about. The
Yeah.
thing that made me be like,
Even the content
I cannot
itself,
be involved
the content
in this,
itself.
was the thing that you told me about that was like, if you've basically a whole trend based on if you've got if your mum is the black
yeah.
parent, you are a good mixed race person, and if your dad is the black parent, you're not. Is that right?
Essentially,
If you basically have a white mum,
if you basically have a white mother, then
you're not a good mixed
that
person.
essentially they're like that explains why you're so insane. And also,
That really makes so much sense.
yeah,
Not
yeah, exactly.
being sarcastic.
Yeah, yeah. But like it's like they the collective society, it's like right away they know something is off about you, and when they find out that
Then it's like,
because you have a white
aha.
mother, they're like, aha, that's why.
What?
You're
Okay,
so-
I don't understand this at all. What are the connotations here?
The implication is that white mothers are completely ill-equipped to parent their mixed children.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
so
Isn't that
fucked up.
awful?
And that you won't have been taught anything.
Taught
So you're like, I guess it's like you'll have no house training, you'll have no
Yeah.
like cultural understanding
Right.
or like etiquette, and you'll be complete like, you know,
You'll be out here
basically,
not knowing how to
you'll
do
be
your hair.
metaphorically
You
looking
won't
like
take
you've
your
been
shoes
through a
off
bush
before you go
backwards the
inside.
whole
Like
time.
those kinds of things.
That's so wrong on all kinds of levels.
Yeah, it's and like, and again, I mean, I think about white mothers who are really concerned and of course love their kids and would be so mortified and horrified to like
Of course.
see
And why is the
that.
emphasis on the mother
I
only?
know.
That's what's really interesting.
I find it so
it's
fascinating.
really interesting because with that, like, what I thought we'd kind of made some progress, but we're basically going back to
Yes.
where we're saying, like, dads can do nothing, and
they're not responsible for
we
anything.
accept that.
Yeah.
that they don't do anything, and they're not
no one will hold them
responsible-
responsible
and no
for
one
anything.
will hold them accountable for anything.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And once
Okay,
again, the
so
women
I'm
bear
staying
the
off
brunt.
TikTok.
yeah, it's
Once again, the
scary.
women bear the brunt.
It's actually quite scary.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
I was actually just thinking, you have two sisters,
I do.
which is amazing. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like your relationship with them, and like there's definitely an element of sisterhood in this book. There's obviously an element of growing up and girlhood in this book, but I often think about like I'm an only child, and my cousin and I are really close. She's also an only child, and she is mixed Filipino and white, and I'm obviously Filipino and Ghanaian. But we grew up so close together. This wasn't really a conversation that we ever had. Like, I know growing up, I always felt like I needed to explain to people that she was my cousin, and I wanted to like, not even explain, but like I was really like proud of it, and I wanted people to know that like we were family, and I was excited that we got to go to the same school together. Again, as someone who didn't have siblings, I was like, this is like my person. But yeah, I'm curious to know what that was like for you. Like you and your sisters, were you super close when you were younger, growing up, or even up until now? And like, did you ever have those conversations about your mixedness or being Japanese?
So my closest sister Mickey is 10 years older than me, and Erica is 12 years older than me. So there's a big gap.
age
Same
gap.
parents.
Yeah.
My mum got pregnant when she was 43. My dad was in his 50s. South of France, little romantic holiday. I can see them South of France.
Let us picture it.
Let's not picture it too much.
Fair enough.
But I feel like that makes me feel quite chic that I was conceived in the south of France.
Yeah,
that makes me feel good.
I like that.
I like that. Rather than like the accident, which is the other side of the story. But yeah, so I guess growing up, we were close in that they were. I don't know. Yes, we were close, but not in the way that we would like play together.
Exactly.
Yeah, they would sort of.
They're older than you.
They're older than me.
Yeah.
They used to like bathe me and like change my nappy. I don't remember that, but I've been told. And then as I grew up, I can't do maths, so let me just think about this for a second. But so I was 10, Mickey was 20, Erica was 22.
Exactly. Yeah.
They were, they'd be going out clubbing and I would, stand at the front door and cry my eyes out because all I wanted was to be with my sister and to go out clubbing with them, even though I didn't really know what clubbing was. And I'd watch them in their bedroom, and I was so in awe of both of them, and I'd be in their bedrooms and watch them like doing their makeup, or be with their friends and like come in and try and be funny and cheeky and try and make the older girls laugh. And like, I distinctly remember them, like, we grew up above a cafe that my dad owned. It was called Samuel Johnson's in Wimbledon. This like lovely coffee shop that played jazz and did yummy food.
Wow.
It was really nice.
Yeah.
But it meant that we had access to like all this food and sort of like the Diet Cokes and the Sprites and all of that in the big fridge in the basement. So, and I remember I'd sit there with my sister and her friends, and they'd be mixing the Diet Coke with the Sprite, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, that's so cool! That's the coolest thing in the world!" Those like really formative moments. That are just sort of so. I don't know, not cool. At the time, you think they're just the coolest in the world.
Oh my gosh, yeah, of course.
So I guess I was always wanting to grow up a lot quicker than my peers because I wanted to catch up with my sisters.
Yeah.
And then there was a period of time where they kind of disappeared out of my life, and I kind of felt like an only child. They both went to university. Mickey lived in Paris. Erica, moved out. And that was, I think at the time I didn't realise that it was hard, but now in retrospect I realise that it was hard because there was always this desperate longing in me to be with them and to just grow up, just get to 18 so that I can be out there in the world with them.
Right.
And it meant that I had a very interesting trajectory from a young age. I started modelling when I was 14 and was immediately introduced to this very adult world and industry. I was working at the age of...
It makes you grow up really fast, doesn't it?
I grew up so fast.
Yeah.
And I was already mature for my age because of my older sisters and my older parents as well. So I was kind of on this fast track to being a mini woman. But of course I wasn't. I was a child. But it was interesting. It was an interesting path. In terms of talking about being mixed race, we never spoke about it. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't it's only something that I've recently started talking about, to be honest.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years. Yeah.
And you think that's the same for your sisters?
Yeah, I think they probably talk about it even less than I do. I guess we don't talk about being mixed race. We speak about being Japanese, for sure.
Yeah.
And Mickey has started seeing my mum every Monday, and she like takes my mum out for lunch, and then they just speak Japanese so that Mickey can keep up her Japanese.
Right.
And we're all trying to converse in Japanese a bit more with each other, but it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
It's a kind of it's a courageous thing to do. It takes courage for
sure.
all of us to do it, because none of us are particularly skilled. Mickey's the best, but we weren't taught it from a young age. So, and I think there's that funny thing of being vulnerable with those that are closest to you.
Yes.
I can be so vulnerable with people that I don't know, and my friends and my partner, but when it comes to family, in a way, we're so close that we can't see each other, and you kind of need to have those conversations. You do need to hold each other at arm's length, and you do need to kind of drop into a more formal way of conversing with one another, which we don't do because we're sisters. You know, we don't even need to talk.
Yeah.
To understand each other.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, I never had any of these conversations with my parents. I never really spoke about it with Michelle, my cousin who I mentioned before. Not that I didn't, and like I don't even think I felt like I had to. It just wasn't anything I considered bringing up or talking about with any of them. Even though I had a lot of big thoughts and big feelings about it, it's just not something I ever broached.
I think it's, and I think this is also something, obviously, that we are really keen to, well, it's part of why we wrote the book and why we're doing the podcast, is like, ultimately, your parents don't have an experience of being mixed race.
Yeah.
So, if we're talking about the business of being mixed race, like, it's difficult because they're supposed to lead and they can't lead on this because they don't understand the experience and they don't really have sight of it.
No.
Yeah.
And of course, like, as a child, even for some of us as adults, the version that we present to our parents is always going to be like slightly different to potentially like what the outside world gets.
Oh God, yeah,
for sure.
There are so many layers that you choose to expose or hide, dependent on the context that you're in.
Yeah.
And there's something so wonderful about being back home, and I'm lucky because I am able to be myself when I'm with my family.
Yeah,
I'm able to be soft. I'm my softest when I'm with my family. But it also means that they're not privy to some of the harder aspects of myself.
Yeah.
The difficult things that I've had to go through. And actually, having written this book now, I'm having conversations with my mum that I've never had in my life, that I would never have had with her if I hadn't written this book. Yeah. And she's talking to me in a way that she has never spoken to me before. And we're learning things about each other.
That's incredible.
Are you enjoying that? This is terrifying me. I don't want.
She's
just
like,
for anyone listening,
she's
like,
like,
read my book.
Don't talk to me about it.
My family and friends. Let's not discuss it.
That's so funny.
Our book, The Half of It, is now available to order. Head to the show notes, click the link and get your copy. It's really important for new authors. And so if you want to support us, please do get a copy of the book.
Yeah, I relish making people feel uncomfortable.
Oh my God.
As you can probably tell from my book, my mum is now listening. So she read the book and now she's listening to the audiobook version. And, there's like a description of cum in one of in like one moment in one of the chapters.
You're very comfortable with bodily fluids.
Yeah, I know, because it makes people feel uncomfortable, and I find that interesting. So I'm like, okay, let's dig into that. Why does discharge make everyone be like, discharge? Let's not talk about discharge.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's got it, guys. Come on.
It's true, and it's actually really important. Like, it sounds weird saying, it's important to talk about discharge, but it is. Because it is, girls. And also, otherwise, it's like, shocking when you find that you have.
My mum just handed me a book. She was like,
I
go ahead and
remember
read that.
the first time I saw discharge in my pants.
You're like, same.
And I spoke to my sister. I saw it in my pants. It was so weird. Mickey's incredibly smart.
This is why I would want to have more than one child, because of this reason.
Right.
I didn't have anyone to ask these questions.
Yeah, but now you can just, like, now that we're not repressed.
Yeah, exactly.
We can just do it ourselves.
I'm like, girls, talk to me about your discharge.
Yeah, tell me. Show it to me.
It's discharge Sunday. Let's get it all out.
No, I distinctly remember we were visiting Oxford University because my sister was considering going there, and I was in the bathroom. Me and my sister went to the toilets, different cubicles. I pulled down my pants and I saw this discharge in my pants, but I didn't know it was that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Mickey. She was like, yeah. I like waddled out the toilet. So I was like, what's that? And she was like, oh, it's fine. That's just natural. And because of that experience, I was able to be cool about it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And now I'm like, let's everyone be cool about it.
Yeah. Which
love it.
It is important. I was
For
obviously
sure.
joking, but not joking.
Yeah, it is really important. I really actually do relish those conversations, and I like that we're able to expand the realms of the kinds of conversations that we have traditionally had, and also meeting each other as adults as well, which is really interesting. I'm such a mama's girl, and I'm the youngest as well, so
Right.
I'm the baby. But having now written a book and having done something adult and not just being a predominantly an unemployed actor for my whole adult life, I'm now, we're now having conversations that feel like adult conversations.
Yeah.
And she's seeing me in a different light. And so that allows her to allow me to see her in a different light, if that makes sense.
Yes, it
Yeah,
does.
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, seeing your parents as people for the first time. I was having those moments recently. Unfortunately, like through grief, through my mom losing her sister, my aunt, who I was also really close to. But I remember I was having this conversation with her about how, ultimately I'd never seen her cry before.
Your
And
mother?
my mom. Had never seen her cry. Same with my dad. Had never seen him cry.
Wow.
And until these like really devastating points. Whereas I'm a crier, I'm the sensitive one, and I
me
will
too.
cry at the drop of a hat.
Me too.
Like I literally have cried.
She's not lying.
I've literally cried at two otters holding hands, just floating down the stream.
Oh, honestly,
I literally bawled my eyes out. I was like, they're just so perfect and good and
I'm
pure
that
in this
bitch
world.
as well.
Exactly.
It's true.
And my parents have always been like, "What is she crying about today?" But no, and like you said, having these conversations and meeting them as the people and like humans that they are, because I, again, being an only child, I've always seen them as these not necessarily larger than life, but kind of just a little bit untouchable in that way. I'm like, they're my parents. My dad has always tried to prepare me for when they die. And I'm like, no.
seriously?
Yeah. And I'm
In
like,
what
no.
way?
Like anytime I'd lose something, I'd be late to
God.
something, or something goes wrong in some way. He's always like, we're not always going to be here. We're not always going to be here. Mom and I won't always be here to
so stressful.
find such and such thing for you or do this thing for you. And I'm always like, yeah, whatever.
That's so funny because
like,
right.
Bye.
You know he's trying to protect you,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
actually he's just traumatizing you.
It's really
It's
scary.
actually quite dark. But like financial stuff, that kind of thing. Like sometimes more serious, sometimes like, things like losing my keys or something.
It's very practical.
It
and
is very
it's-
practical.
It's good because I do think, like, because I recently had to have this conversation with my dad because my nan's passed, like my granddad's passed, like obviously my mum passed a while ago, and like I was like to my dad when my nan passed, because it was really hard because like we knew that she wanted to stay at home, but there were certain things that like we hadn't discussed of like, what if you can't stay at home, and like what if X and X happens, and like what should we do if X and X happens? And I was like, we can't have that. Like, you need to be extremely clear. Everything needs to be laid out. We need to have adult conversations where you tell me like what you want to happen when you pass away, and like when you get too old to look after yourself,
Right.
because ultimately it makes it much harder and worse for everybody if you just don't have the conversations. Sorry, I've
Yeah.
gone into practical mode now
I
because
know.
I've done this too many times.
I was going to say my parents had to sit me down and give me that conversation.
You've got to just, it's
which
better
I
to-
hated. I was like, hate every second of it. But
It is.
I get
you're
it.
gonna hate
Yeah.
it. But
I think it's healthy to talk about death.
yeah.
My dad is obsessed with death.
God.
Which makes him sound like a kind of goth boy, but which he's
Yeah.
not. He just, he is very aware of his mortality and will
Yeah.
frequently talk about it. And we always take the piss out of him because he's so preoccupied by it.
Wow.
But my dad is about to turn 83 on Saturday.
Amazing. Happy birthday to your dad.
Happy birthday, Papa. You'll never listen to this, but I love you.
maybe we'll cut you a
I
little
know,
clip that you
exactly,
can send
yeah.
on WhatsApp.
Oh my God,
just send
he
it
would
to him.
actually
Yeah.
secretly
Shout out
love
to
that.
Dad.
Shout out to Dad.
He's been kind of quietly pissed off that I've been waxing lyrical about my mum and just have not
I'm
mentioned him at
sure.
all.
Oh, bless him. That's so
I know.
funny.
I really need to connect with the Irish side of me.
Oh
'cause
my God,
that's-
yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
a whole other thing.
I was
That's
like,
the
you
next
come,
book.
I
That's
was
the
like,
next
exactly.
book.
And you come back
Exactly.
on. We'll talk about it then.
Exactly.
I was like, I want to hear about it.
Guys, can we do a play?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
So
I would
excited.
love to do a play.
I know.
Nothing about it
that
doing
would
a
be
play.
amazing. But I feel like that's also, I mean, speaking of plays, I feel like that's a really good. I remember you mentioned earlier you're talking about the hard stuff versus being your softest self when you're at home. What are the times when you feel like you have to be hard or tough?
I think when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I wore an armor. I was weirdly writing about this in my morning pages this morning. I didn't have any close friends at secondary school. I had one, but she unfortunately got really ill and had to leave. And then I was kind of marooned in this school, and I didn't feel like I fitted in because I was artistic and I didn't go to a particularly artistic school whatsoever. It's very sporty, which is sort of the opposite of what I am. And the way that I kind of empowered myself, I think, was by wearing this armor of
Right.
being harder, of being, and I think I was also very silly, but it's not necessarily like a hardness.
Right.
It's more of a, oh God, I don't know how to describe it. Like I suppose,
Like a wariness.
well, I guess the modelling, when I started modelling, that really helped because I was like, okay, that's something that I can wear. I can wear
Right.
the model
The
badge,
model,
and
yeah,
that will
yeah,
give
yeah.
me an edge. That'll
Right.
help me survive, not
Yeah.
feeling like I
Edginess, I feel like, is kind of a like.
connect
Yeah.
with people around me. And then I went to Lambda, and I was doing what I loved to do every day. Like I was waking up and doing and acting. It was the most incredible thing in the world with like-minded people.
Right.
And I found myself, it wasn't even, it was a softening in that I could relax for the first time ever and just be like, oh, this is what
It's like
I've
the
longed
exhale.
for my whole life. And I wasn't being, my needs weren't being met at the secondary school that I was
Right.
at. And so that makes you, when your needs aren't being met, that makes you harden around
Right.
yourself because you don't understand why no one else is like you or why your
Yeah.
priorities aren't the same as everyone else. And in order to survive that, you kind of tell yourself that you are, I don't know, cooler than everyone else, or you're
Right.
more mature than everyone else. And that believing that helps you get through it when
Yeah.
actually you're exactly the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
You're just not, your needs just aren't being met. You know, I was the only girl at my school not to apply to university. I was the only girl in my school not to go to university. I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated from school.
Yeah.
I just knew I didn't want to go into another institution because I had hated school so much.
Right.
My brother.
Right.
He didn't know what he wanted to do. He just knew that it wasn't going to be that.
Yeah.
And he certainly wasn't going to be going back to school.
Going to school, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
But I knew I wanted to act. So, yeah. Wait, what was your question? Oh, the
No,
hardness.
that was the question. Yeah.
that you
It was kind of trying to see what that was in contrast, to your feeling like you're the softest version of yourself, as you were saying before.
Yeah. And I think in my family, we don't sit around the dinner table and have debates.
Yeah.
We don't sit around the dinner table and talk intellectually about things.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I mean I can be my softest self.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to try.
Yeah.
I don't have to try and be anything. I can just sit there and eat my food in silence and not have to
Yeah.
be anything. My parents don't
course.
put expectations on me, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And so all the expectations that I have come from me, and I've been given the space to find those things and what I expect of myself, and those obviously change all the time.
Yeah. That's great. I love that.
Did you spend much time in Japan when you were...
Yeah, we would go every year, either for Christmas or Easter or summer, to go see my grandparents. And then when I started having to pay for my own airfare, then I would go like every 2 years because it's just really expensive. And now I'm trying to go every year because I hadn't, when the pandemic hit, since 2020, I hadn't gone in 3 years. And then I went back last year and it was so amazing. But I'd never longed for Japan in that way because I'd only had maximum 2 years away from the country.
Right.
And so 3 years was just like, I actually can't handle this. Like,
Yeah.
this is
You're like, I've
so
got to get back
unpleasant.
there.
Yeah, I've got to get back there. And also I think my mother, falling ill really rocked my whole world.
Right.
And I felt this desperate need to go back there to lay the foundations of a semblance of community in where we live, where we have our house. And then there's also talk about selling the house, and that's also a painful conversation that I'm like desperately trying to find ways in which we can keep it. But so I do go back to Japan, and it feels like home in a way that England doesn't feel like home.
Can you unpack that?
Japan is so tied to the child in me.
Right.
I feel so held.
Yeah.
I said this before. I feel so. I think I said this at the launch, or
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
I feel really held by Japan and the smells and the faces and the nature and the sounds, all of it just feels so comforting. I was raised by my mother predominantly, and her love. My dad was working and so was my mum, but she worked from home, so she was able to give me a lot more of her time and attention. And so that love feels inextricably linked to my motherland, so that when I'm there, I feel so comforted in a way that I don't feel that when I'm in London.
Yeah.
England feels a lot harsher, and also the faces aren't the faces that I associate with love. My mother's face is what I associate with love.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you say that, because you saying that has unlocked something in me as to why I felt so the same when I went to the Philippines. And this is, I think, almost 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years in May. And I hadn't been back there since I was about 4 years old. So I had some memory, but not a lot. And I think it was because, again, like you were saying about your mother, I grew up around my mother and her sisters all the time, we lived really close together, and they were the people that I saw the most. So when you're talking about the faces, when you're talking about, again, smells, food, for example, or just
The
those
skin and the hands
sensory
and-
things, that was how I felt when I was in the Philippines, and I couldn't put my finger on why. I was like, but I've not been here. I was like, I didn't feel like I'd been here long enough to be able to say that that's how it made me feel. And I didn't feel like I'd spent enough time there over, again, my childhood. I'd been to Ghana way more times. But yeah, I think, you just articulated, you've like unlocked something in me that made me go, oh wow, yeah, I think that's what it is.
And this is why we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, I really related
exactly.
to that. I really, really related to that.
I wondered as well if, like, you, even though people don't necessarily always see your Japaneseness, if you see yourself in those faces, and so you seeing yourself in those faces is also comforting and grounding in some way.
I think so. I also think not.
It's fine.
I was watching Shogun, and obviously desperately jealous of all the actors in it.
Right.
And knowing, I would never be able to play these roles. And that's it's a historical drama. I totally get it. But it always comes a sadness when I watch Japanese dramas, especially sort of internationally loved Japanese things. But I'll watch, an episode or 2 episodes of Shogun, and then I'll look in the mirror, and my brain will literally go, "Oh, you're beautiful," in a way that my brain doesn't say that after I watch Cameron Diaz or
It's really cool.
or I don't know,
Downton
Abbey.
Yeah, but that's what I had when I watched Bridgerton. Like, I wrote about it in an article. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been like tricked this whole time, because I actually like period drama and I like period pieces, like reading, watching, and I had felt that I was, really enjoying them. Yeah. But when I watched Bridgerton, I was like, I haven't been enjoying these. Now I'm really enjoying it. Like, I'm now fully ensconced in like the feeling of romance, the feeling of like, being, feeling beautiful. Like the majesticness of it all. I wasn't getting it.
No.
Like ramped up to what everyone else was getting, who's watching, seeing themselves in it.
Yeah.
And then when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, it's unlocked. Like this is
Yeah,
suddenly a
so
new
true.
level of enjoyment.
It's so profound when you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, "Oh my God, I'm beautiful," and I don't feel like I need to change anything about me. I don't long for something else, or I'm not like, picking at my skin or like, thinking of different ways to look a certain way. I'm just looking at myself in the mirror and go. And actually, I have it the other way where I'm like, okay, how do I look more Japanese?
Yeah.
Which is also a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I went to my partner, I was like, after we watched Shogun, I was like, maybe I should dye my hair dark, because this is my natural hair colour. I've always been very fair since a young age. I mean, a few highlights in there, but, this, like, hair is my own.
Yeah.
And he's like, baby, you are perfect the way you are. And obviously I started crying.
I would.
But it's amazing the way that our brain just like it desperately wants it, like flip-flops between wanting to be this and wanting to be that, because you never feel like you're enough. Occasionally you do. Sometimes you do.
For sure.
And
I do the same thing. It's why I wear black eyeliner pretty much every day.
Right, yeah.
Because of that reason.
It's those little things.
Yeah, because I'm like, and I can see again the way could see the way that my eyes used to look versus the way they look now, and I'm like, I was like, and I know as well, like as I get older, that future is going to change, and I'm like, how am I going to feel about that if it goes away? But yeah, it is. It's like. And then there are days where I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is great. Like, I look how I'm supposed to look. Yeah, and I feel good about it.
Do you think doing this podcast has helped with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think even just being able to admit it
Having a space to talk about it.
Yeah, and like, and even admitting when, because I often struggle with feeling like, oh, the thing that I'm feeling is bad, or admitting the thing, like even when we were talking about, all my friends are white, I was like, I know how people are going to feel when they hear that.
Yeah.
And so it's like right away having to grapple with like not correcting people when something is true. Like, it's true that I did grow up around majority white people and had majority white friends. Like,
Same.
and I'm just like, I can't really do anything about that. Whereas even now, like admitting, like, yeah, like I do want my eyes to look the way that they looked when I was a child. Like, I do want to look more Asian. I want people to see that. And when people don't, it does still make me feel a type of way.
Yeah.
And I admit, and I on the last podcast we I said like I wear my hair like this because I don't want there to be a mistake that I am black.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that I like that's like the only reason I
the
wear my
only-
hair like that,
yeah.
or like whatever. This is my hair, but like, as in when I wore my hair differently for the last podcast,
Yeah,
it wasn't
you had it
out.
up. Yeah.
I felt incredibly self-conscious. I didn't feel like myself.
Yeah.
I don't feel like myself if my hair isn't like this.
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest.
It's this weird thing where, we carry around this vessel that is
Yeah.
meant to encompass everything that we are within.
Yeah.
And it just is, for some people, it's more capable of doing that than for others.
Yeah.
But I think when you're mixed race and you... How do we talk about white passing without saying white passing?
We sometimes say white presenting.
Yeah,
or people or being perceived as white is kind of how
Yeah,
it's not
and I know
being
very.
perceived. I think being perceived
Yeah.
as white is good because white presenting is also makes my blood boil.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, I wasn't white presenting when I was being racially abused.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
I think it's like one of those ones
That's
though
so
where
true.
it's like, if we can decouple from the ideal situation is that we decouple from using that kind of phraseology anyway.
Yeah.
It's not really the preferred route forward
Yeah.
to be using
No.
these kind of labels.
And I often think they're always levied at people who we know aren't white. So, or like, as in, they're not being received in the world as fully white people. So I find that really
No, of course they're not.
remarkable. Like, because like, and we see it all the time with someone like Meghan Markle, for example. And I'm always just like, but we know this woman is black. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, like, you're not white presenting, you're not white passing when you're literally being racially abused. Like, what are we talking about? I
Yeah.
don't get it.
Yeah. So, I guess looking the way that someone thinks you ought to look if you are a certain race. That's quite a long way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll find something.
We'll find something.
We'll get there. Hang on, I lost my train of thought.
I think, sorry, just before you go on,
Yeah.
I think like the key here for me is like, I know that people don't mistake me for white, and
Of
nor will they
course.
mistake you for white.
Yeah.
We need to actually be having conversations and asking people who are labelled in this way currently and do
Yeah.
face situations where their identity is not recognised. We need to be opening discussions about like, how they want to be
Yeah.
approached, and
Yeah.
actually just get more comfortable with asking people. Like, we talk about this in the book, like
Yeah.
we ask people what their pronouns
Yeah.
are. Like, we ask people, like, just ask people who they are,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
and they will tell you.
Yeah,
They'll
yeah.
tell you. Yeah, of
And
course.
so getting more comfortable with doing that in a way that's not, doesn't come across like you're just like, asking them, where they're from. We've all had it, like,
Yeah.
but just asking like how you identify yourself,
Yeah.
Sure.
rather than identifying people as standard procedure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
think. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
I
your
mean,
thoughts
I
on
have
got
no idea
interrupted.
what I was bang on about. I think I was basically trying to say that we all contain multitudes.
Exactly.
And we put a lot of pressure on our bodies to convey those multitudes.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of stress to put on our bodies to do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't.
doesn't.
It doesn't work. It works to an extent, but it doesn't work in its entirety. And I think our bodies also take that on,
Yeah.
and so it's like finding ways of being kinder to our hair, our eyes, our
Yeah.
skin color, our skin, and trying to, I don't know, just accept and love ourselves a bit better for the sake of our bodies.
Yeah. What's next? Obviously, what's next in your acting career? Will there be more books in the future, more writing being done?
Absolutely
What's
no idea about
what's
acting.
the-
If anyone would like to employ me, please do.
We've got
got an
exactly.
actor for
Please
hire?
do. Yeah. Actor hire.
No, it's been pretty bleak, the industry, with the strikes.
Yeah, I
we've
can
heard.
imagine.
Yeah,
And
it's-
things have become. Yeah, I feel like things are a lot shorter. There's not a lot of people. Obviously, there's not a lot of people working. It's
Really
Yeah, I
hard.
mean,
State of things is
honestly,
not-
none of my actor friends are working.
wow.
None
Even
of
my brother, who's a AD, he's
Yeah, all crews are just
Yeah,
out,
all
just
crews.
unemployed, and it's tough
It's
out there.
tough, yeah.
Same in LA. When I was in LA just
Oh,
now,
really?
it's even worse in LA.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I went and did some ADR for a BBC comedy that's coming out this year in LA, and I finished the session and I went to the sound guy. I was like, "So what? You got a busy day?" He was like, "No, you're my
wow.
only session," and it was
Oh God.
it was in the
yeah.
morning.
what's ADR?
Additional dialogue recording, where you just record over the scenes.
The scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you like miss something,
something,
or the
yeah.
sound,
Yeah.
didn't work out.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah,
Jeez.
which is quite shocking.
That is shocking.
So I'm directing a short film that I've written.
Yay.
That's the next thing.
Oh my God, cool.
Yeah, we've got a team together now, which is really exciting.
That's
DOP
really
and production
fabulous.
team.
Yeah.
So hoping to shoot that this year. It's all black and white, short film. Hopefully shooting on film.
Wow, amazing.
Similar themes to Mongrel, but also very different.
Yeah.
And then, 2 production companies want to commission Mongrel.
Amazing.
It's with a few other people as well,
Yeah.
a few other places. Taking my time with it. I don't want to
Yeah.
jump into bed with anyone super quick because
Yeah.
it's precious baby.
Of course.
I
Yeah.
want to make sure it's getting to the right hands. But so that's what's happening.
Brilliant.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited
Fantastic.
to learn more. I feel that you can't tell us any more.
Well,
about the
I
film.
mean, there's not really much to tell. It's just we'll see. I really want it to happen, but I don't want to rush into anything.
Yeah.
Because I think it could be incredible, but I'm only interested in working with really fantastic people
Yeah.
who also share the same vision.
But yeah, I want to ask you before on our finishing note, for those who have not read the book, like what do you want to tell them that you've given to them? And yeah, if there's anything that you're kind of like hoping people take from it.
I think I want people to feel seen and God, it's so hard. I don't know, because I don't want to feel like holier than thou.
Yeah.
People take from it what they take from it, but I think maybe that they feel less alone, less isolated in their not just mixed raceness, but also being a woman.
Yeah.
Or just a human being. I don't know. It's tough out there, guys, and I hope that this book acts as a kind of home for people who need it and want it.
Absolutely. I think that's the best thing about reading for me. The things that I find the most enjoyable are those moments of connection, are those moments where I'm just like not only being entertained, of course, but feeling like there's little bits of myself that I'm like picking up along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's a nice thing to think about, the reclamation of all the little pieces of yourself that you've lost along the way.
Yeah.
And meeting these characters who
Exactly.
then encourage you to pick those pieces up again. And reform yourself in a beautiful way.
Thank you so much, as always, for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, as it really helps us in the charts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share with a friend, family member, or enemy. We're not picky.
And also, our book, The Half of It, is now available for pre-order. So have a look in the show notes and you can get your copy there.